The average American consumes 2 to 3 times as much salt as she or he should on a daily basis. And only 15% of that actually comes from your salt shaker. About 10% occurs naturally in foods, and a whopping 75% is put there by the food industry. A can of soup or a visit to a restaurant generally means hidden salt. Excessive salt intake leads to high blood pressure, and high blood pressure, which leads to cardiovascular disease, is both silent and deadly. Believe it or not, you only need about 1/2 gram of salt a day for normal function. On average, Americans consume about 4 grams, and many probably don't even realize it. The food industry adds salt to just about everything, from breakfast cereals to cheeses. Why? Because we consumers have developed a taste for it. We tend to buy foods that are high in sodium and shun those that are not. Other reasons on top of this include the fact that salt is a relatively inexpensive additive. It has some preservative qualities, and it adds texture to the food. Oh, and also, it covers up a few bad tastes that are byproducts of food processing itself. Packaged foods pack a wallop of salt. 1 gram in some cans of soup, 2 grams in some frozen TV dinners. Understanding the connection between sodium, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular disease is key here. To put it simply, high blood pressure causes cardiovascular disease, and cardiovascular disease leads to heart attack and stroke. How? High blood pressure is, in part, the result of too much blood volume in our circulatory systems. When sodium levels are high, the concentrated mineral draws more water in and expands your blood volume. That volume must be pumped through the blood channels, putting extra stress on your heart. The volume itself creates expansion pressure on the vessel walls, stressing weak points which occasionally can rupture. If this occurs in a blood vessel in the brain, a stroke is the result. Who's at risk? Well, approximately 30% of the U.S. population has high blood pressure, which is a reading of 140/90 or greater. And high blood pressure causes about half of the deaths from cardiovascular disease worldwide. Age and race can increase risk. Nearly 70% of Americans over the age of 80 have high blood pressure, compared to only 10% between 30 and 39. African Americans are 40% more likely than whites to suffer from high blood pressure, and they're 50% more likely to die of heart disease and 80% more likely to die from a stroke. That's why it's recommended that seniors and African Americans of all ages consume no more than 1.5 grams of sodium a day, compared to 2.3 grams a day recommended for the rest of the population. In fact, adhering to these recommended amounts over the next 10 years would save approximately 150,000 lives per year. To give credit where credit is due, some food manufacturers are trying, and we, the consumers, are not exactly cooperating. For example, ConAgra's version of low-sodium Healthy Choice chicken noodle soup and low-sodium hamburger helper went down in defeat. No buyers. But there is some good news on this front, from products that companies have more quietly promoted with reduced sodium, such as the products Kids Cuisine, Chef Boyardee, and Banquet frozen dinners. So what can we do to take more control of our own sodium intake? Well, first, read the labels. Total intake per day of sodium should not exceed 2.3 grams, except for African Americans and the elderly, who should not consume more than 1.5 grams a day. Any food with 0.5 gram or more in a portion is probably worth avoiding. Second, watch the restaurants. A single meal often contains 4 grams of sodium. And think twice about that free bread on the table. It's one of the worst offenders. Third, remove the salt shaker from the table at home. Why add insult to injury? And fourth, accept a little pain. Studies show that we like the taste of salt, and weaning ourselves off of it does noticeably affect our mood. But studies also show that adjusting to the change happens quickly and the cravings disappear rapidly, making the small sacrifices certainly worth it. Cutting your sodium intake in half can drop your blood pressure 5 points, and that decreases your risk of death from heart disease by 9% and from stroke by 14%. It's well worth it to give it a try. For a health commentary, I'm Mike Magee.